And a good Monday evening to you. Welcome into the Nick Craig Show on Charlotte's FM News Talk, 107.9 FM, WBT, a busy program for you on this Monday evening, a primary season, of course, taking place here in North Carolina back a couple of months ago, but the primaries taking place all over the rest of the United States, and a major decision by voters in Louisiana on Saturday is leaving some major political discussions to be had. You probably saw the news over the weekend as Louisiana Republican Senator Bill Cassidy got absolutely blown out in his own primary. I mean, he got absolutely annihilated in his own primary. President Donald Trump endorsed a candidate in that race by the name of Julia Letlow, who took 45% of the vote. The state treasurer in Louisiana, John Fleming, got 28% of the vote, with Cassidy getting 25% of the vote. So you've got a sitting incumbent senator that is unable to secure more than 25% of the vote in a Republican primary. And so to me, that brings forth the question in the broader discussion for today's program that Republicans want results. We as conservatives, we as Republicans have unfortunately seen too often this concept, this idea that when we're in the position to lead, in the position to govern, we don't. And so my question to you is one that is pretty simple. Are you sick of not getting results on any of this stuff that we talk about? Are you sick of the constant, oh, well, we can't possibly do that. We wouldn't want to do that. No, we even though we're in the majority, even though we control government, even though we have the majorities in the U.S. House, the U.S. Senate, and the Oval Office, we're not allowed to govern. We can't possibly govern. What is this? Why is this every single time Republicans are in the majority, we're afraid to govern? 704-570-1079 is our phone number. That's where you can call or text, be part of the program on this Monday evening. Our text line driven by Liberty Buick GMC. Why is this the case? Why are people on the right, so-called conservatives, so-called Republicans, why are we so afraid to lead when we're in a position to lead? I mean, it is totally illogical to me. Yet we see this same situation over and over again, that we just can't do it. There's just no ability to do it. And so with the president getting heavily involved in the Louisiana primary, ousting Bill Cassidy as I believe this was his third term that he was running for re-election. So for Senate, that's 12 years that he's been in office, looking to serve another 6 here. Obviously, that's not going to happen after he came in third place in a three-man primary in Louisiana on Saturday. And with this, well, the president was getting some payback as Bill Cassidy at the time in 2021 voted to convict Donald Trump at an impeachment trial after January the 6th. Cassidy was one of 7 weak, spineless, feckless Republicans that broke ranks and voted 57-33 to move forward with trying to convict the president. They needed 67 votes to do it. That's why it didn't happen and it didn't move forward. But Bill Cassidy, even though his vote literally didn't matter, right? He could have voted yes or no, and the result was still the same. The Democrats were nowhere near the 67 vote threshold that they needed to move forward with convicting Donald Trump. He still decided to vote yes. And so the president, well, getting his revenge with him posting on Truth Social after the election. Bill Cassidy, after falsely using his relationship with me during his political career and winning elections because of it, voted to impeach me on preposterous charges that were fake then and now are criminally insane. His disloyalty to the man who got him elected is now part of legend, and it's nice to see that his political career is over. I would like to thank the great people of the state of Louisiana, and this big victory will only make me work even harder for your success and all that comes with it. I love you all. Make America great again. Signed President Donald Trump, posting that on Truth Social right around 11 p.m. Saturday night after the votes were being tallied in Louisiana. And so I am all in favor of this. Completely. Totally. We're seeing this in other races right now, just out to our west. Thomas Massie in the state of Tennessee. What's going on there right now? He's, of course, being challenged. I think their election it's actually tomorrow night. So I guess we'll cover that live as election results come in tomorrow. He is very likely, at least from some of the political polling and some of the betting markets, which seem to be an interesting way to keep a track of politics these days. The betting markets show that there's a very strong likelihood that Massie will be out of his seat as well. And I saw a bizarre stat that Bill Cassidy losing in his primary was the first time in 14 years. Listen to this. Bill Cassidy losing his primary on Saturday, sitting senator for the state of Louisiana, was the first time in 14 years that an incumbent senator had lost in the primary. Now, that should be concerning to each and every one of us. It absolutely should be. And it brings forth a much larger discussion that, unfortunately, we do not have the time to get into this evening over term limits, right? It is seemingly impossible for these individuals to lose. Bill Cassidy's the first guy that's lost in 14 years. You can't tell me that there hasn't been a senator, at least on the Republican side. It was the only Republican in 14 years. You can't tell me that this is the first time in 14 years that a Republican senator needed to go. That this isn't the first time in 14 years that somebody who ran as a Republican, in some cases may have even ran as a conservative, and consistently worked against the voters that he and or she represented. We see this all the time. We're seeing it right now with John Thune, who's allegedly leading the United States Senate. And when I say allegedly leading, I mean literally doing nothing. We've had the SAVE Act and many other very consequential, important pieces of legislation sitting in the United States Senate for months. And I think Republicans and conservatives, they're at a little bit of a breaking point. This is not to say that you just have to fall hook, line, and sinker with whatever the president says. I don't believe that's good for anybody. I don't think that's good for the president. I don't think it's good for the individual members of Congress, whether they're in the House or the Senate. And frankly, I don't think it's good for their constituents. I'm not asking for, and I don't think the vast majority of people on the right are asking for just pledged loyalty to the president of the United States. No, I don't think that's the case at all. I think what we're asking for is results. Republicans outperformed in 2024. They showed up in droves here in North Carolina, in our neighboring states, in large part throughout the entire rest of the United States to make their voices heard in 2024. They not only got Donald Trump back in the Oval Office, they kept the Republican majority in the North Carolina House and flipped the United States Senate. That is what happened in 2024. And so for those members of Congress, the Bill Cassidys, in large part the Thomas Massies, and we'll see his fate, I guess, coming up here in about 24 hours tomorrow night. For those members, people, aka your voters and your constituents, want action. We want things done. We want the agenda that we voted for moved on. I'm not interested in the consistent stalemate. I'm not interested in, we got to make sure we got to play nice because when the Democrats get control back at some point, we got to make sure that no. No. I'm not interested in that. I don't care about when the Democrats get power back. We just won. We won in 2024. Our agenda needs to be the one that's pushed forward. There's a reason that voters across the political spectrum voted for not only President Donald Trump, but for Republicans in the elections in 2024. It's because they wanted to see major changes economically, from a border security standpoint, which is in large part is evaporated because there's no more illegal crossings, public safety. I mean, the list goes on. election security, a major topic for voters. The House has done its part. I know that not everybody loves Mike Johnson, but to his credit, he's herded the cats successfully in the United States House. He's got them banging on all cylinders over there. The SAVE Act passed there months ago. And John Thune, do nothing Thune, in the United States Senate is just sitting at his desk doing nothing, not moving any of this forward. And it's incredibly frustrating. And so for individuals like the senator that we're talking about in Louisiana, Bill Cassidy, and for other individuals, the Thomas Masseys, who's up for a primary election tomorrow, for these guys and gals, there are some female members of Congress that will likely be in this discussion as well as the primary season continues to roll out. They are dealing with, I think, general frustration from the Republican and the conservative voter that feels like nothing is moving, or at least it's not moving fast enough. It's not moving quick enough. Things are not being done in an expeditious enough fashion or manner. And they're incredibly frustrated by that. And can you blame them? I can't, because I'm in the same position. I'm in the same boat. I'm ticked off beyond belief. I've got a hilarious clip from Republican Senator John Kennedy. He was on Fox News yesterday discussing his colleague and Bill Cassidy losing his primary election on Saturday. We'll get into that coming up here in just a couple of minutes. But before that, we'll grab a quick break here on the Nick Craig Show. 704-570-1079 is our phone number. Quick break. We're back right after this. Charlotte's FM News Talk, 107.9 FM, WBT. Welcome back to the Nick Craig Show on a Monday evening. 704-570-1079 is our phone number. That is where you can call or text, be part of the program as we lead you up until 10 o'clock. We are talking about an interesting election result, and interesting might be an understatement, out of Louisiana over the weekend as long-term serving a member of Congress, Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy got trounced in the Republican primary over the weekend. It wasn't like he just got barely edged out by the candidate that finished in front of him. No, the Trump-endorsed candidate in Representative Julia Letlow got 45% of the vote. The Louisiana State Treasurer in John Fleming got 28% of the vote, and Cassidy barely broke 25%. I mean, that is an absolute drumming. You are a two-term, 12-year serving member of Congress, and you get ousted in your own primary. And it should be no surprise, because I think more and more individuals on the political right are finding themselves in the position where they say, enough is enough. We want results. You know, we showed up, we voted, we door knocked, we donated money, we hosted fundraisers, we went to events, we stood out at early voting locations or election day locations, got out there at what time the polls open here in North Carolina? It's like 6:30 in the morning. We did all this stuff and we got you guys elected. And now we want to see some ROI. We want to see some return on our investment, the time, the treasure, the talent that we put into getting Republicans and conservatives elected all over the map. For Senator Bill Cassidy, his colleague in Republican Senator John Kennedy, who is the other senator from the state of Louisiana, was on Fox News over the weekend. He was on with Peter Ducey on the Sunday briefing show that takes place on Fox News. And Kennedy was asked pretty bluntly, what do you make of this situation in Louisiana? And for those that follow Senator Kennedy closely, you should be no surprised he had a typical sarcastic answer to the situation unfolding in his home state. Take a listen to this.
Well, Peter, here's the way I see it. Unless you're God's perfect idiot, the result was predictable. I mean, ground control to Major Tom. The polls have shown for well over a year that Senator Cassidy was in trouble. I think the president's endorsement of Congresswoman Letlow was sort of the icing on the cake. Bill knew that. But he decided to run anyway. I respect that. I thank him for his service. He was very gracious in his concession speech. We've now got a runoff between two fine people. For what it's worth, I don't plan to get involved. A wise man once said nothing. Why? Because he's a wise man. But I don't plan on weighing in. And, if one of them starts talking about my mama, I might. But otherwise, I'm just going to vote like everybody else.
So that's Senator John, that's Senator John Kennedy, his colleague, and Senator Bill Cassidy getting destroyed, absolutely blown out in the Louisiana Republican primary on Saturday. And the words out of Kennedy's mouth, only God's perfect idiot would have thought that Bill Cassidy could survive the primary. And so you're seeing, I think now, finally, it's only taken, 10 years to get here, that for individuals that are elected in government, and I think this is relevant more broadly across the board, right? Here in North Carolina, some of the same discussions have taken place and did in fact take place, right? The major political news here in North Carolina back in early March when our state primary rolled around was that Senator Phil Berger, who's been in Raleigh going back to the year 2001, he won his election in 2000, sworn in early 2001, serving 25 years in the North Carolina General Assembly, being the president pro tem of the North Carolina Senate from 2011 all the way up until now, since Republicans took control of the Senate and have not given it up, lost in his primary to Rockingham County Sheriff Sam Page. And why did that take place? Because voters in Rockingham County were ticked off as it related to discussions over casinos. They've got a casino just to their north in Danville, Virginia. There was some movement back a couple of years ago in the General Assembly to move forward with bringing a couple of casinos to the state of North Carolina. One of them would have been in and around Rockingham County. And voters in that area, even though they've literally got a casino on their border in Danville, Virginia, said, hell no. We don't want this. We're not doing this. And they spoke. That was a much closer election to what we're talking about in Louisiana. But I think the end result is still the same. Voters eventually get to a point, and unfortunately sometimes it takes way too long to get there. But voters eventually get to the point where they say enough is enough. Right? And it's not this is not some like crazy one strike rule. Right? Many of these individuals, I mean, you can look at Tom Tillis as the greatest example of this here in North Carolina. These individuals have plenty of opportunities to prove that they will stand up for the voters that elected them either to the North Carolina General Assembly or, in the case of Tillis's point or his current position, a member of the United States Senate. They get plenty of opportunity. They get plenty of rope. And it's repeated situations where individuals unfortunately do not respond in an appropriate manner, where individuals decide that they are going to abandon the individuals that put them in the political office that they're holding, right? Because it's not their seat. It's not their position. They are temporarily in that spot thanks to their constituents, their voters across their state, their county, whatever sort of election we're talking about. They temporarily occupy that seat. They temporarily occupy that position. And so we see this with the Democrats all the time. When they get in charge, when they get in power, they get results. Now, for the fringe, radical, progressive left, the control is not enough and they want to go, crazy far with it. But we saw this under the Biden administration. And I think now for Republican voters here in the state of North Carolina, or in North Carolina and in Louisiana and in many other of these races, Tennessee will literally see tomorrow night, right here live on Charlotte's FM News Talk, 107.9 WBT. Those voters are going to say, yeah, you're not giving us the results. You're not giving us what we wanted. You are stonewalling the administration. In case in point, we talk about Thomas Massey. You're totally stonewalling the administration. We're not interested in that. We, yes, supported you, but we also supported the President of the United States. And I would argue in large part, voters have a larger vested interest in seeing the success of the president that they voted for in comparison to the random member of Congress or random member of the United States Senate. And so this is a growing trend that if you are a wishy-washy Republican, whether it's a state legislative race or a major congressional race, House or Senate, you gotta have your shields up on this thing, because we are seeing now in Louisiana very clearly on Saturday night that voters are done with the status quo. They are demanding results, or they're booting you out of office, plain and simple. And we'll see if that happens tomorrow night in Tennessee. 704-570-1079 is our phone number. That's where you can call or text and join the program on this Monday evening. We'll grab a quick break here at the bottom of the hour. More of the Nick Craig Show coming up right after this. 107.9 FM, WBT. Great to have you here on a Monday evening. 704-570-1079 is our studio hotline. That is where you can call or text, be part of the program on this Monday evening. We're talking about some pretty shocking election results out of Louisiana over the weekend. Two-term Senator Bill Cassidy got absolutely trounced in his party's primary on Saturday, being unable to crack even 25% of the vote, which from all accounts, no matter what sort of number you look at, I mean, that is just an absolute bloodbath for an individual who has served 12 years in the United States Senate. Two-term senator, 6-year terms, running for his third here, losing to Representative Julia Letlow and Louisiana State Treasurer John Fleming, who got 3 more percentage point of the vote than Cassidy. I mean, it's a disaster. And so this brings forth this larger conversation about the frustration that I think is brewing in large part right now with Republican voters. The last time that this happened was back in 2012 when a Tea Party challenger unseated Indiana Senator Richard Lugar. So this is something that has not happened in 14 years, something that by any stretch of the imagination you would call as pretty uncommon. And I think it's uncommon for a pretty good reason, right? We know that it is very hard for a member of, in large part, any elected office to lose. Now, this becomes more prominent the higher and higher up the chain that you move, right? At local levels, elections are very unique. Elections are very dynamic. In any particular election cycle, you can see a candidate lose. But as you go up the ranks, as you get into state government, right, we'll talk about the North Carolina General Assembly here. Moving on up from that, you get into like the Council of State, people like the state treasurer, the state auditor, the governor, so on and so forth. There is a lot of power in being an incumbent. And that is even more relevant when you make the transition from state government to Washington, D.C. When you leave the boundaries of the state of North Carolina and go become either a member of the United States House or the United States Senate. You have an incredible advantage as an incumbent. You have a monetary advantage. You have a huge ability to essentially fundraise insane amounts of money to beat out your opponent. You have inherent name ID because in many cases, these individuals serve consistently for many, many years. So there's a bunch of huge advantages for individuals that win and have the ability to continue to serve in that position. But there comes a point where things break. There is, in fact, a breaking point for voters. And I think that we are very, very close to seeing that now on a much larger scale across the nation. We, at this point, are almost a year and a half into the second administration, the second Trump administration. And for voters that are looking at a midterm election, Republican and conservative voters, looking at a midterm election coming up here later this year, which inherently will not favor the GOP. And that's not because the GOP's done anything wrong. It's not because the GOP is bad. It's frankly because midterm elections always favor the party that is not in charge, aka right now the Democrats. Republicans are looking at a position in which they will not have majorities in the House and potentially the United States Senate. And so I think a lot of folks, myself included, are clamoring and saying, all right, clock is ticking here, guys, right? It's May 18th. The clock is running. Blink a couple of times and we'll be past Labor Day and just a couple of weeks away from the election, right? We'll have that very fast sprint right when everybody gets back and school gets back in session from Labor Day to early November. It is an unbelievable sprint to election day, to election season. Early voting here will kick off in mid-October in North Carolina. Actually, probably closer to early October with as lengthy as an early voting period as we have. And so I think a lot of folks are looking at that and say, what are you guys doing? Like, this is something in terms of having power, something in terms of being able to truly govern that you are potentially going to lose not very long from now. Potentially losing that in just a few months. Coming up here in, obviously it won't happen in November. New members will be sworn in early January, but the election results hopefully will be said and done the morning after Election Day. And we'll know what party will have control of the U.S. government. Obviously, the president is not on the ballot. He will stay in the Oval Office, but we'll see what happens with the United States House and the United States Senate. And so with this clock ticking ever more rapidly each and every day that goes by, we want results. I mentioned earlier, John Thune is unfortunately the worst example of this. We've got a guy that is allegedly leading the United States Senate that seemingly refuses to do anything. We have seen largely inaction, complete and total inaction from John Thune as the supposed majority leader in the United States Senate. And I think it's driving people nuts. I think it's driving them absolutely crazy. And so what is the end result? Well, you get some people that get caught up in the crossfire. And I think somebody like a Thomas Massey, a Bill Cassidy, they get caught up in this crossfire. And I'm not saying that those individuals, speaking specifically of Cassidy, we don't exactly know what's going to happen with Massey yet. It seems plausible that he will lose his primary tomorrow. But they're kind of caught up in this crossfire of general frustration that things are not happening as quickly as we had hoped. And in some part, that is because government is so big, government is so bloated, it is so large, it is so out of control that it takes forever to literally do anything. I mean, if you work at a federal government or if you work at a federal agency and need to purchase a new clipboard, it's like an act of freaking God to get that done. I mean, you've got to convince 7 million people above you on the food chain that you truly need that clipboard. Meanwhile, you'll watch hundreds of millions of dollars worth of fraud take place in states like California and Minnesota. We've got this very questionable ABA spending, autism spending here in the state of North Carolina, broken by a state auditor, Dave Bolick, back just a couple of weeks ago. So, to get anything done takes forever, of course, unless you are defrauding the U.S. taxpayer. Of course, unless you are defrauding the people of the United States. That's real easy. That's real quick. We can get that on speed dial. Snap your finger and your wish is my demand, and we're just good to go. You can waste all that money as much as you'd want, as quickly as you want. And so people see that and they go, why can't government move like this? Why can't Congress get its act together? Why can't John Thune suspend rules in the United States Senate to get what I would argue will probably be the most consequential piece of legislation that the United States has seen in decades in the SAVE Act? That's not hyperbole. And I'm not saying that to be dramatic. I'm not saying that to be shocking here on the radio. No, I mean that genuinely. The SAVE Act would fundamentally secure elections across the state, across the United States of America. It would put states like California and New York, where we know that there is insane amounts of voter fraud taking place, where you step foot in the state and somebody is standing there with a ballot, regardless of who you are, where you're from, whether you're legally in the country or not, if you're a convicted felon or not, none of that matters. You're a resident in another state. You literally step foot in the state of California, and there will be some NGO volunteer standing there with a voter registration form and a ballot with your name on it. It's insane what goes on in the state of California. The voter fraud there is absolutely rampant. So the SAVE Act would completely shatter that. It would mandate how states like California, like New York, handle their elections. Now, fortunately, the changes here in North Carolina, I don't know how significant they'd be because we've already got pretty tough and stringent voter laws here in North Carolina. We have voter ID. If you show up to vote, whether it's during the early voting period or on election day or vote absentee by mail, you have to verify who you are. If you vote absentee by mail, you've got to go through a very strenuous process of photocopying an ID. You've got to have individuals who witnessed you vote and attest on a form with the threat of perjury if they lied. I mean, there are some steps, and there should be. I mean, we should not be okay with and seemingly just out in the open with it's okay to commit fraud, because that's what we see in many of these other states. That's why you have people voting at the age of 160 years old in the state of California, because the fraud goes on, but the fraud is all leaned towards the left. They don't care. Now, of course, if there were Republicans committing fraud in the state of Florida, then this would be a completely different story. We'd see perp walks. We'd see people going to prison. We'd see judges sentencing people to life. That's what would be going on if Republicans were the party responsible, the group responsible for committing mass amounts of fraud in the state of California. But of course, that's not happening. We know that that's not happening. And so the SAVE Act is a major, consequential, I would argue, one of the most important pieces of legislation to pass the U.S. government in decades, and it just needs to be moved on. But John Thune is too afraid to do so. He doesn't have the courage to do it because he's afraid of what the media might say. He's afraid that the Washington Post or the New York Times or USA Today or CNN or ABC or CBS or NBC, that they might write a mean story about him, that they might criticize him for suspending certain rules in the United States Senate, which he has the authority to do so as the Senate Majority Leader, that he would suspend those rules to pass this administration's agenda. And I think the Republican and the conservative voter has had enough. They are up. They are frustrated with this process. They have seen all that they need to see, and they're starting to retaliate. And I think that very clearly shows in the election results in the state of Louisiana. I mean, Bill Cassidy made his vote in 2021 to convict Donald Trump. I mean, so you're talking about something that happened 5 years ago. And yes, while that obviously was probably part of the reason why the president of the United States got involved in the primary, I think in large part it's just general voter apathy with what they feel as do-nothing members of Congress. People that run their mouth all the time, do a good job on interviews, maybe say the right things on a television interview or on a radio interview, or say the right thing on social media. But when the rubber meets the road, when it comes to, doing your job, that is something that has become highly controversial for these individuals. Highly controversial. They don't want to hear any part of that whatsoever. And I suspect that as the primary season continues over the next couple of months, we will probably see more and more incumbents continue to lose their primaries. I've got some interesting polling on a couple of other races on the GOP side that we'll get into here in just a couple of minutes. You can join the show on this Monday evening at 704-570-1079. That's 704-570-1079. We'll grab a quick break. You're listening to The Nick Craig Show on Charlotte's FM News Talk 107.9 WBT. Welcome back to the Nick Craig Show, Charlotte's FM News Talk, 107.9 FM, WBT, 704-570-1079 is our phone numbers. We're talking about, I think, a general frustration with Republican voters kind of across the board. We saw a major primary upset in the state of Louisiana over the weekend. A two-term Senator Bill Cassidy getting absolutely blown out in his own Republican primary, securing less than 25% of the vote. And there is a strong likelihood that we will see something similar coming up less than 24 hours from now over in Kentucky, where current member of Congress Thomas Massie, according to Polymarket, which I think has become a very interesting source to look at as it relates to political polling, which, it's not a political poll, but money talks. And if people are willing to put money behind something, you probably have a pretty good chance of whatever the end result is coming to some level of fruition. And as it stands right now, Thomas Massie is down 22 percentage points on Polymarket against his opponent in Ed Graylan that Donald Trump has endorsed. And so we will likely see in the span of a couple of days, Saturday to Tuesday, two pretty well known, I think Bill Cassidy and Thomas Massie are individuals that you would say are well-known members of Congress. Massie, no question about it, over the last year or so. Cassidy, maybe not as much, but people genuinely know who he is in comparison to other members of Congress that you probably have never heard their names before because they're not out in front in the cameras all the time. They're not getting all the media airtime, who will potentially lose their primary. It's not a done deal. In the state of Kentucky, the race is still probably going to be pretty close. I don't suspect that we'll see the results like we did in Louisiana with a complete and total just destruction of an incumbent candidate. But there is a possibility that Massie loses by a couple percentage points. And for those that follow elections closely, when you lose by more than a couple of percentage points, that is known as a major election defeat. That is not something that is standard. Most elections are pretty close for the most part, within a couple of points. And so when you lose by 3, 4, 5, 6 percentage points, well, that becomes a much different discussion and what I would like to call a political bloodbath, because that's exactly what it is. Let's head on over to our phone lines at 704-570-1079. Susan is hanging on line 1. Susan, good evening to you. Welcome into the Nick Craig Show. What's going on?
I'm frustrated that Michael Whatley is still so far behind.
Yeah, there was some recent polling from Carolina Journal that showed him pretty far behind. I guess the only thing I would say in response to that is it's still early. Michael joined us Friday here on the show. If you missed that, I encourage you to check out the Nick Craig Show in your favorite podcast app. You can check it out on YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, all the other platforms as well. We chatted with him on Friday, talked about some of the issues. But, I think this goes to, Susan, the point I was making earlier about how incumbents, even though Roy Cooper is not an incumbent senator, but having spent 40 plus years in state government, there is such a baked in advantage typically for those incumbents that is incredibly hard to overcome, regardless of how good of a candidate you are or aren't. I mean, it's just it's a really tough situation for those candidates to deal with that major incumbency. And again, I know that Roy Cooper is not a current member of the United States Senate, but he just spent 8 years as governor here in North Carolina. Before that, spent 12 or 16 years in the Attorney General's office. Before that, serving as a member of the North Carolina Senate. He's been in public office going all the way back to the 90s. So this is a guy that has a major advantage. And so while it's not a primary, we saw the primary here take place in March. Michael Whatley with a very sizable election night victory in early March of this year. Things get very different when you get to the general election. No question about it. And so, yes, all eyes will be here on the state of North Carolina. All eyes will be on this race between Roy Cooper and Michael Whatley. They'll also be in Maine, where you've got a major Senate race taking place there. They'll be in Ohio, where you've got a major Senate race taking place. In Georgia, where you've got a major Senate race taking place. And for those, and there's some interesting commentary from individuals on the political right about the about the individual power of somebody like Donald Trump. They'll make the argument, they'll make the point that Donald Trump is he's lost his muster. He doesn't have the political power that he once had. I mean, take a look at the election results in Louisiana on Saturday night. If Massie loses his primary tomorrow, which we'll be covering here live on the Nick Craig Show and the TJ Ritchie Show, which I'll be hosting again tomorrow night. I'll be on from 7 to 10 p.m. tomorrow as well. We'll be looking at that race. We'll be looking at those results live, depending on if Massie wins or loses. If he loses, I think it is safe to say that the president's influence on elections, the president's influence on campaigns are incredibly strong. And it makes sense that they are. He's the current sitting president of the United States. He has an incredible amount of influence and power. He wields an incredible amount of that within the Republican Party. Some people are turned off by that. They say, oh, Trump's controlling the GOP. Well, I mean, yeah, he's the Republican president. How could he not? He's the most powerful Republican in the United States of America. If not him, who? Who would be leading the Republican Party outside of the current elected Republican president? I mean, it makes no sense whatsoever when people make that point, but they do. Totally illogical from my vantage point. Of course, he's going to lead the party the same way that Barack Obama did when he was the president of the United States. Makes total sense that the president of the political party in which they sit serves and leads the party. That's going to do it for a Monday night edition of the Nick Craig Show. Don't forget to check out the podcast in your favorite podcast app. You can also check out the show over on the website, nickcraig.com. We'll do it again tomorrow night right here on Charlotte's FM News Talk 107.9 WBT.